This is what we do here. This is Lying in Certainty by Neri Marsili out of the University of Sheffield, and it's to a beer in the Oxford Handbook of Lying. And so I think this is from 2018. So this is a good 7-8 years ago now, whenever this was written. And as always, my first time reading it, I wonder if like the times just being what they are, this will be a little dated even for philosophy. But this is my first time reading it. We're just going to evaluate, and at the end, if you stick around, we have a community rating system where you get to rate too alongside. But as always, feel free to ask questions, and I will do my best to explain what I think the authors, why they bothered to write a philosophy paper and get it published, because let me tell you, it's fucking hard to get a philosophy paper published. So we'll try to figure out what's good about this paper, if anything. Here we go. A prominent characteristic of lies is that they come in a variety of forms and kinds, and this is part of what makes them elusive and difficult to identify. As Montaigne nicely stated, while truth is unique, the opposite of truth has many shapes and an indefinite field. So this is Michel de Montaigne, the old French philosopher from like 1,000 years ago. This is one of these guys that everyone says you should read Montaigne because it's really good. But like, you know, it's old stuff. I haven't gotten around to it, but like, yeah. It's like, this is one of these like, hey, it's great. It's a great quote. The opposite of truth has many shapes and an indefinite field. And this does recall, what was it, the best of times and the worst of times? I think the beginning of that says like, you know, a happy families are all kind of similar, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own, its misery is unique. So it's like, yeah, there's something to this. Like when you get away from like the real or like the thing you're like looking for, everything can go off the wall. All right, so now we are talking about the Latin of Monus Ponens. Yeah. Okay, Sock, now it looks good. Yeah. But it is true that the number of false things is a higher order infinity than the number of true things. Sure, but I mean, this is more of a practical statement. We're not talking about like higher order of infinity. It's that if we're trying to deal with the things that are going wrong, then like that's a practical thing, the way we see things going wrong. And that's what's going on here. We're not talking about the formals. We're talking about like if I say, okay, there's one truth, but then there's a million ways it could go wrong. Well, yeah, there's a lot more of those, but practically I'm only going to be looking at like 10. So it's like, yes, that's correct, but I think that is obscuring the better point, which is when we are dealing with stuff, there's multiple ways that we can like fuck stuff up, and that's not infinite. Okay. You have a bad habit of splitting comments over two comments? That's fine. Truth is not unique. Oh, I didn't even see that one. Yeah. No, truth is not unique, but that's fair. Okay, one of the ambitions of this book... Oh, is this like the intro? Interesting. Okay, one of the ambitions of this book is to categorize these different shapes and to provide systematic criteria to distinguish lies from other utterances. Okay, maybe this is not the... maybe this is just his contribution to this book. I don't know. This can be a hard challenge indeed for a theory of lying. The more difficult task is that of drawing lines. There is a whole gray area of deceptive utterances that are difficult to classify, for instance, so-called half-truths, and quite importantly, it is in this gray zone that liars strive. To shed some light in this obscure area, this chapter will consider the problem of classifying statements that are not fully believed to be false, but that are nevertheless not believed to be true. Are these statements lies, and how much confidence in their falsity is required for them to count as lies? We will focus on such questions, exploring the thin, elusive line that distinguishes a sincere assertion from an insincere one. So yeah, so you can see already right here, we've got a different mode of evaluation. Is something sincere or insincere? Like this is what is really at stake here. Sincerity, not truth. So this is interesting that we're just going to be talking about sincerity maybe more than the truth of a statement. Okay. On a standard view, an utterance is a lie only if it is an assertion and the speaker believes it to be false. However, the expression believe to be false is not really helpful to deal with intermediate cases, as it does not specify which degree of confidence in the falsity of P counts as believing to be false. As we analyze this issue, we will see that lies are difficult to categorize because lying is often a matter of degree. This is not because lying is a scalar predicate. One cannot say that P is more of a lie than Q, but rather because being sincere is. A speaker can be more or less sincere, so that indirectly a lie can be a more or less severe violation of the linguistic and moral norm of sincerity. Yeah, and see here, this is what we were talking about last time, pragmatic norms in language. And so there is a norm of sincerity where you take people to be, not fucking with you in everyday speech. You expect them to be giving you the best information that they have. This is not the case. People do not always give you the best information that they have, but you assume because most of the time that's how we get by. There's no reason for someone to be fucking with me. And so I expect them to give me good information. But this is not a matter of truth and falsity. This is a matter of pragmatics. So yeah, this is what we were talking about last stream too, about the, what were we talking about? Doesn't matter. But we were talking about, implicature, what is implied in a conversation that's not strictly implied by the logic, but implied because you have certain assumptions when in a conversation. Okay, speaker certainty, uncertainty, and graded beliefs. Quote from Ben Franklin: "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." Chocolate, what's up? Footnote 1, intent to deceive. Yes, exactly. What is certainty? And so no, footnote 1 is very boring, it looks like here. I don't know if you read it, but yeah, I'm sure you didn't. What is certainty? Most authors agree that it is a kind of attitude that a subject can have towards a proposition. I guess, okay. More specifically, certainty, or what philosophers call psychological certainty, can be defined as the highest degree of confidence that a subject can have in the truth of a proposition. Thus understood, certainty is always relative to someone's standpoint. It does not matter if the subject has no ground or bad grounds for holding that belief, because certainty only requires that the subject be supremely convinced of its truth. Okay, so yeah, like I said, now we're drilling this down. What is certainty? Well, this is more of the probabilistic, super high degree of belief in, or probability of being true. And this is fair. This is one way that we do cash this out. This concept of certainty, defined as the highest degree of belief a speaker can have in a proposition, presupposes that believing comes in degrees and that there are degrees of belief lower than certainty. That beliefs can be graded is evident if one thinks about daily situations in which a subject lacks certainty about a certainty in a proposition that he nonetheless, to some extent, believes. To see this, consider some examples. Chaos, what's up? I'm certain that most people lack a high degree of analytic power. Yeah, that's fair. But I was thinking about this earlier. I've been thinking about this actually for a while. People are people. People are average by definition. Half the people are dumb and half the people are smart because that's how averages work. And so half the people lack the amount of analytic power that the other half do. But the truth is, most people are in the middle somewhere. So what do you mean by that? You're not talking about, you can be talking about everyone on the lower half of the bell curve. And that's fair. But the top half, they're going to have a higher degree of analytic power. So I've been trying to think, I don't want to be calling people stupid so much. People are average, and then, there are a bunch of stupid people. But you got to remember, most people are in the middle somewhere. So, okay. But I've been trying to think how I'm going to change the way because I don't want to be, it's not helpful to be here in America and just being shitting on the other side at this point because they're idiots, which a lot of them are. But people are people and people are average. And then we've got some dumb people and we got to get those people out of the fucking government. Okay, says the median of where the range falls varies widely between different societies, as well as the gradient between the top and the bottom. Yeah, that's fair. It's how we split this is going to massively, massively matter. Okay, but anyway, what are we doing? Yeah, so we're talking about graded belief. So yeah, you might be absolutely certain that the Earth is round, but you may not be 100% certain that it's going to rain tomorrow. But you might think, it's likely going to rain tomorrow based on the weather reports. This is just how I'm reading this so far, but let's see the author's examples. To see this, consider some examples. Suppose Groucho believes that 1, he has a pair of mustaches. 2. Bulgaria will beat Azerbaijan in the next football match. And 3. There's life on some other planet in the universe. Groucho regards 1 as certain, 2 as probable, and 3 as merely more likely true than not. So 1 was that he has a pair of mustaches. Groucho neither fully believes nor fully disbelieves 2 or 3. These intermediate partial beliefs, believing to be probable, believing to be unlikely, are called in the literature graded beliefs because they can be ordered in a graded scale. Groucho is more confident in the truth of 1 than he is in 2, and in 2 than he is in 3. Formal accounts of degrees of belief, namely Bayesian accounts, hello Ivan, represent this scale with real numbers from 0 to 1, where 0 indicates certainty in the falsity of P, and 1 indicates certainty in the truth of P, and 0.5 indicates uncertainty, cases in which the subject regards P as just as likely to be true as to be false. On this view, uncertainty is the middle point, 0.5, of a continuum of degrees of belief whose poles are certainty in falsity and in truth of the proposition. And so figure 1 you can see right here. To provide a formal account of the previous example, one could say that Groucho has a degree of belief of 1 in the first thing, 0.75 in 2, and 0.51 in 3. So yeah, like completely certain about the mustaches, somewhat certain about the probably true, the outcome of a football match, and only just slightly over uncertainty of the uncertainty, like the absolute in the middle of life in other planets. Cass says it rains. If the Earth was spherical, then the rain would fall off the perpendicular off the atmosphere, ergo the Earth is flat. I think that's a very sound reasoning. So, okay. Any account of sincerity that takes into consideration this wide array of graded beliefs will have to explain how they relate to the boundaries of the concept of lying. For instance, suppose that Groucho states that Bulgaria will beat Azerbaijan while believing that it is probably false or as likely to be false as true. Would these utterances be sincere or insincere? And more generally, how are we to draw the boundary between sincere and insincere utterances, and consequently between lies and not lies? Yeah, and see, we haven't even defined what sincerity is here. Notice that. We don't know what sincerity is yet. We've only been talking about okay, truth, falsity, and then sincerity, but this is the naive view of sincerity, the received view. We haven't defined sincerity yet. But here we go. Sincerity and uncertainty. What constitutes the essence of lying, if not saying what you don't have in your heart? And this is from Rosmini Apologetica. Seems like some very old thing. I don't know who Rosmini is. Okay, a necessary condition for lying is that the speaker utters an insincere statement. There are several ways to define insincerity. In a general sense, insincerity refers to a discrepancy between the psychological state of the speaker, for example, believing, intending, desiring, and the psychological state expressed by his linguistic action, for example, asserting, promising, requiring. Defining insincerity amounts to defining the nature of this discrepancy. And for y'all who listen to Prof for Prof sometimes, he talks about this sort of thing too. Stupidity is a discrepancy between the expected outcome and then the actual outcome. So there's a bunch of things that are defined in these ways. Limiting the present discussion to assertion and accepting the standard view that assertions express beliefs, this chapter will analyze insincerity as a discrepancy between what is asserted and what is believed by the speaker. Once graded beliefs are taken into account, the main challenge is to define how large this discrepancy has to be for a statement to count as insincere and hence as a lie. In the philosophical literature, this challenge is generally overlooked or ignored. It is taken as an uncontroversial claim that a statement is sincere when the speaker believes it to be true, and insincere when the speaker believes it to be false, and that a more fine-grained analysis would be unnecessarily intricate. The standard insincerity condition for lying, IC, is generally phrased as follows. IC means, or is, S believes P to be false. This condition correctly accounts for prototypical cases of lying, but is ill-suited to consider cases of uncertainty and graded beliefs. Since graded beliefs and uncertainty are ordinary psychological states, it seems that a theory of lying should account for them. To see that the standard account of insincerity struggles to handle graded beliefs in a satisfactory way, consider the following example inspired by historical events. George is a political leader and tells to a journalist propositions A, B, and C, Okay, and tell something one to a journalist. So, propositions A, B, and C indicate George's degree of confidence in his utterance in 3 possible scenarios. So, 1 is Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. A is Iraq has certainly no weapons of mass destruction. B is probably Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. I can't speak. And C, probably Iraq does not have weapons of mass destruction. And this is where I was wondering, what examples and kind of things would they be talking about? We're talking about Iraq war stuff and not the current state of the United States. Frank says, even though they said they're going to assume assertions reflect beliefs, I have trouble accepting it even for the sake of argument. People make assertions all the time without knowing their beliefs. Yeah, that's entirely fair. Like, I actually had the thought go through my head too before when that got said, that is a very, very big assumption. What I think is going to happen here is that we're only going to look at examples where this is going to be relevant. So this is not going to be used in the way they said. It was kind of uncarefully stated, Frank. And so I completely agree with you. It will, but like the examples given will be plausible that this applies. And so I think this was ill stated by the author, but like it won't be as big of a deal as we go forward, but we will see. So like, yeah. So if you say Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, that could be plausibly something you believe. I mean, plausibly. At the time. Might have made sense. And so like, clearly this is a riff on George W. Bush. If anyone doesn't remember. Maybe you don't. Okay, scenario 1A is a clear-cut case of lying since George believes one to be certainly false. The standard account correctly tracks the intuition that this is a lie. Yeah, so George says weapons of mass destruction. George says that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, but they believe that they don't. Certainly not. And so that would make one a lie. Okay. Okay, in contrast, 1B, George believes the statement to be probably true. Even if he is not completely confident that the statement is true, it seems that in this case he is not lying. So he says that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, but then he only thinks it's probably the case. The utterance is inaccurate and perhaps misleading because it misrepresents George's degree of belief in one. However, being inaccurate or misleading is clearly not the same as lying. Condition IC is again on the right track since it predicts that this utterance is not a lie. Problems arise for the scenario 1C where George believes one to be probably false. So probably Iraq does not have weapons of mass destruction. It seems that condition IC does not count as a lie because IC was what? IC is you believe it to be false. So IC is does not count a lie because George does not utterly believe one to be false. However, intuitively, this is a case of lying because George is saying something he believes to be very likely false. Since it excludes this sort of cases, IC is too narrow and needs some refinement. Yeah, so if you have to think it's like hardcore false, like 100% false, to make it a lie, then yeah, if you think something is just unbelievably likely to be false, but you're not completely certain, then that doesn't work for this formal setup. That's all it is. Keep in mind, that means that definition will miss cases that are like at the limit of being false, but not actually reaching it. But generally, we would still say the person's lying at that point. It's like if I told you, well, there's 98% chance to rain tomorrow, and I say, oh, it's not going to rain. It's like, well, why would you say that? Like, you don't need the 99.9999 to tell someone that it's probably going to rain. Okay. Cases like 1BC suggest a more fine-grained account of lying is needed, one that appreciates how lying can involve graded beliefs. Such a definition of lying should offer an account of what we might call graded belief lies. Statements that are not outright believed to be false nor true, but are nonetheless lies. The next section will review a few attempts to revise the definition of lying in this direction. Kate Parr says, I know it will rain tomorrow, but I could be wrong. Yeah, and that's the issue. It's that we were talking about this last time, we can say a lot of this stuff where it's pragmatically kind of okay. People understand what you mean. You're not saying like I have certainty. You're saying I'm very likely to understand it in a certain way. And so that's the problem here, is that unless you meant the absolute certain thing, the definition doesn't work anymore. So yeah, that's the example from last time. Yeah. Okay. Degrees of disbelieving. Carson has offered a definition of lying that captures graded belief lies. His proposal presents a strong and a weak version of the insincerity condition for lying. The first, strong version, requires that the speaker believe his assertion to be false or probably false. Let us call Carson's first condition the strong insincerity condition for lying. So, sick, strong insincerity condition. S believes P to be probably, at least probably false. SIC correctly captures prototypical cases like lying of the 1A, where I believe there's no bombs in Iraq, and then I say there are bombs in Iraq. Unlike the traditional definition, it also includes lies that are not believed with certainty to be false, like 1C, that George believes to be probably false. This is an advantage of SIC over IC, since it seems intuitive that saying what you believe to be probably false counts as lying, even if it is arguably less insincere and less deceptive than a full-fledged lie. However, it is not clear that the boundary between sincerity and insincerity lies exactly on the degree of confidence indicated by probably and not on another. And so again, we were back. This is what we were talking about last time, where do you draw the line? Is it because we were talking about genuineness last time, and now it's like, well, what counts as more likely than not? Where do you draw the line between, well, how probable does it have to be? The term probably indicates a degree of confidence in the truth or falsity of the proposition higher than uncertainty and lower than certainty. For the sake of argument, let's assume it stands for a degree of belief of 0.75. If a degree of belief of 0.75 in the falsity of the proposition is enough for lying, then there seems to be no reason to exclude lower graded beliefs like 0.7 or 0.6 that are perceivably higher than uncertainty at 0.5. To see this, consider the following scenarios. Yeah, so now we're just Sorites this, which we were discussing last time. Again, you can Sorites these things. If you say, okay, this is the limit, it's like, well, why not just under that limit? Iraq has weapons of mass destruction at 0.75 likelihood. Probably Iraq does not have weapons of mass destruction at 0.6 likelihood. Presumably Iraq does not have weapons of mass destruction. So 1D, George utters what he believes to be more likely to be false than true, so that it seems that he is lying. However, SIC does not capture 1D because by hypothesis, George's degree of confidence is higher than uncertainty, but falls short of believing 1 to be probably false. Since it fails to account for the intuition that also 1D is a lie, even if arguably less sincere than 1C, SIC is too restrictive. Yeah, and so this is why I like this paper already is better than last paper, because it calls out the problem of where you have to draw the line. The other people just kind of made a hand wave at, oh, this is genuine and that's not genuine, but it was sloppy. This one at least is like, okay, this is one of the views where you have a line drawing scheme, says this is what counts as probably lying and this is where it doesn't, but like you don't know where the line should be at that point. Okay, so Carson's second weak proposal avoids this problem. The weak insincerity condition posits that lying requires that the speaker does not believe the asserted proposition to be true. So WIC, so weak insincerity condition, S does not believe P to be true. Since it acknowledges that utterances like 1D are lies, WIC is preferable to the the strong insincerity condition. Capar says, yeah, but George was dumb. Rumsfeld probably lied. Yeah, well, I don't think George was that dumb, but like he was. It doesn't even matter now. Like, I'd take George W over fucking Trump. Although it's not even good. Frank says, what if George knows there are multiple folk definitions of mass destruction? The statement of is 60 is likely true for one definition, but 75 for another, and George thinks that there is a 30% chance I will understand according to the first, and 70 to the second, but he has a low confidence in his estimation for which definition Frank uses. Yeah, so this would be some sort of context dependence problem. That's fair. So, but that would be, again, that's like a slightly separate problem, where you're trying to match what you're saying to the audience. This is like what the author's trying to do here is like, well, can we come up with a formal scheme that everyone could agree to? as opposed to what you're saying there, which is, well, I have a scheme and the audience has another scheme and I have to sort of coordinate. So that's a coordination problem. Yeah, that's a different problem. But what it looks like I think the author is trying to do is what I was saying in the first instance, is give a formal definition that everyone will have to like agree to. And that is like the goal is to get something acceptable. And then you can say, hey, this is what I mean when I say what I say. And if you mean something else, then like, well, we should discuss what we mean. But like, yeah. So this is more of the analytic philosophy. Let's do our definitions and not meet people where they're at, but like try to be clear about what we're saying. Chocolate says, yeah, but we are really thinking nukes. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's just, Frank, it's just the style of the philosophizing is what's going on here, is to like make a definition. That's what we're doing. Okay. All right. So, however, this is too broad. It incorrectly captures cases in which the speaker has no idea whether what he says is true or false, but goes on saying it for some other reason. These cases are classified in the literature as bullshit. The typical example of bullshitter is the politician who never yet considered whether any proposition were true or false, but whether it were convenient for the present minute or company to affirm or deny it. Now, as long as the speaker has no opinion about the veracity of what he is saying, his utterance is better classified as a misleading utterance than as a lie. And the weak insincerity condition is too broad to account for this intuition. Given that SIC is too narrow and WIC too broad, an ideal condition has to lie somewhere in the middle. Marsili proposes a middle ground between these two proposals. On this view, lying requires that the speaker believes P more likely to be false than true. Call this the comparative insincerity condition. Yeah, and so they're referencing themselves here. So CIC, S believes P more likely to be false than true. Yeah, so I guess it's just like, if you have no opinion but you're just saying whatever the fuck, like, yeah, then you're just bullshitting. But like, yeah, what is this? Unlike WIC, CIC correctly rules out bullshit and statements uttered in cases of uncertainty. Unlike IC, it counts graded belief lies as lies. And like SIC, it rules in the other cases in which the speaker does not believe the statement to be true, like 1C and 1D. A possible worry about CIC is that it implicitly accepts that every belief can be represented as an assessment of probability, and that the speaker would find any such difference to be significant. To avoid this worry, CIC can be revised to CIC star. S's degree of confidence in not P is stronger than his degree in confidence in P. Okay, so we're defining, you think it's much more likely to be false than it is to be true, and like that's your confidence. So you're going against your own feeling of confidence. You have to. So now we've defined degree of confidence here. So your confidence and sincerity are somehow aligned or misaligned. Okay. Of course, it is possible to challenge the very assumption that there is a clear-cut boundary between insincerity and sincerity, so that we should allow for intermediate, indeterminate cases, thereby treating insincerity and lying as vague predicates. See Eisenberg. Yeah, that would be messy. But this intuition can be accommodated by CIC, which, unlike other accounts, allows for a progressive transition from sincerity to insincerity. At the same time, if a neat point of transition is to be individuated, CIC is fine-grained enough to identify a boundary that meets our intuitions and avoids the counterexamples to which the alternative accounts fall victim. The proposed view correctly accounts for assertions that do not specify the speaker's degree of belief in the truth of the proposition, that is, assertions that do not express graded beliefs. The next section will extend this view and provide a broader framework to also treat assertions that express graded beliefs. Okay, so we're going. This does mean that you have an opinion about two things. That one thing is true and that the other thing is false, which usually we do. Usually when we assert something, we are, like if I assert it's going to rain, that also means I am denying that it is not going to rain. So usually this works at this level. I know there's people who can dispute this, but yeah, but it means that you also have to have like this idea that you're actually always asserting two things: the assertion of the statement and the denial of its negation. So this is trying to get around it by basically doubling up what's going on when you're lying. There always has to be a double sort of understanding, which is, not terrible, because in lying you kind of have to know that you're, insincere. You have to know one thing and then do the opposite. Frank says, with bullshit, is it still bullshit if you would have asserted the proposition whether or not you had confidence in it? So not having given no thought to it, but your reasoning for making the assertion not being based on your thoughts. I don't know the technical definitions of bullshit that were being used here. I don't know them. I would assume that in the circumstance, if you are not actually following your degree of belief, but just saying what you think sounds best at the time, then yes. So it's that you are making the call for reasons other than how you think the world is at the time. That's why you asserted the statement. It has nothing to do with truth or falsity, but what you think thoughts sound best, even if you do have an opinion on it. So it might fall down to being bullshit and a lie, but like it would seem like you were bullshitting at that time, maybe not lying outright, but like you were just bullshitting. Yeah, I don't know how they split that. It just seems like if you are in the mode of bullshitting, then you are in the mode of bullshitting, and you weren't considering your own beliefs. But that's what I was just saying. You need this double-pronged approach. You might have an opinion of some sort, but if you don't have the opinion in the right way at that time, then it would fall to bullshit. So that's a good point, Frank. Okay. Insincerely expressing a graded belief. An assertion is insincere if there is a significant discrepancy between the speaker's degree of belief, henceforward B psi, so believing psi, and the degree of belief expressed by the sentence, henceforth B, was that gamma? I forget, but yeah. The previous, I wish I should know my Greek better. So BA or whatever. The previous section has shown that this discrepancy can come in degrees because of the graded nature of certainty, that is, the graded nature of B psi, so your beliefs. A complete explanation of insincerity needs to account for the other side of the coin, the different degrees of belief that an assertion can express, the graded nature of B, we'll call it gamma, I guess. I think is that a delta? Is that a big delta? Shit. I want to look this up. Greek alphabet. Wikipedia, save me. It's a lambda, capital lambda. Okay. Thank you, Wikipedia. Yeah, thank you, Frank. Yeah, so capital lambda. Okay. I should know this, but this is not super critical for anything I do at the moment. Okay, so yeah. Assertions that express graded beliefs are generally overlooked in the literature on lying. This is because in standard cases, statements that express a flat-out belief in the truth of the proposition rather than the graded belief. For instance, one expresses a flat-out belief in the asserted proposition. 1. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Not all statements, however, are as simple as 1, for some express graded beliefs. For instance, in 1E, the speaker believes that 1 is probably true. In 1F, he expresses uncertainty in the truth of the proposition. So 1E is probably Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, and 1F is maybe Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Now, the previous section has considered graded belief lies in which B psi is graded, so your belief is graded. Graded assertions like 1E and 1F, by contrast, are cases in which B lambda is graded. 3 kinds of graded belief lies are hence possible. And this is what I mean, you needed the double analysis. So now we're combining things stuff. So A is B psi, plain assertions like 1 uttered while holding a graded beliefs. B lambda graded, assertions expressing a graded belief like 1E and 1F while uttered while holding an outright belief, and complex cases where both B lambda and B psi are graded. In what follows, I will consider how the insincerity condition applies to cases B and C and discuss the difference between mitigating and reinforcing an assertion. Yeah. So this could get complicated, but basically, yeah, there's going to be there's going to be partials in different areas, and it's just going to be a mismatch. I mean, that's all that's going to happen. If there's ever a mismatch between what you believe and what you assert, then you're going to be in danger of lying. Okay, 2 directions of belief misrepresentation. Few authors have raised the question of how assertions that express graded beliefs are to be analyzed within a theory of lying. Maybauer suggests that there are 3 kinds of B lambda graded assertions that may qualify as lies. Those 1 expressing certainty when you are uncertain, those 2 expressing uncertainty when you are certain, and those 3 expressing certainty or uncertainty to a higher degree than being adequate with respect to your knowledge base. Since the third case seems to include the previous 2, to simplify this taxonomy, I will simply distinguish between 2 directions in misrepresenting your degree of belief, namely pretending you have a high degree of belief or a lower degree of belief than the one you have. A first tempting idea is to assume that these 2 directions are equivalent. This would mean that from a point of view of analysis of lying, pretending to be more certain than you are is as insincere as pretending to be less certain than you are. A reason to make this assumption is that the discrepancy between your state of mind and the state of mind expressed by the statement is the same in both cases. However, at a closer look, this assumption reveals to be naive, as the first case, overstating, is often perceived as being more insincere or more misleading than the second, understating. To see this, imagine 2 utterances. 1G, certainly Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, and perhaps Iraq has mass destruction. That's 1H. Imagine in both cases, George's mental state is in between certainty and uncertainty, so that he believes probably Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. According to the naive view, 1G and 1H are equally insincere because the discrepancy between B psi and B lambda is the same, this 0.25 off. These scenarios differ only in the direction of misrepresentation. 1G represents the speaker as having a higher degree of belief than he has, while 1H as having a lower degree of belief. Interestingly, however, it is natural to assess 1G as more insincere than 1H. The reason that we tend to judge 1H as a prudent statement that cooperatively avoids saying more than the speaker knows, while 1G is perceived as a misleading overstatement that the speaker lacks sufficient knowledge to assert. In other words, ceteris paribus, understanding your degree of belief is generally seen as a cooperative linguistic practice, while overstating is generally regarded as uncooperative. And remember, like I said earlier, we're doing pragmatics here. How do people perceive certain statements? And what can be assumed in a conversation? If you are super confident, that comes off as one way. If you're underconfident, that comes off as a different way. Thank you for using the K sound on ceteris paribus. You are welcome. Yeah. That seems like an aggressive explanation. It is a little aggressive. I mean, yes, Frank. I think it is likely to be correct on average on how people perceive stuff. You might note that, I don't think they referenced anyone when they said this. Okay, and so now they're going to reference someone here from 1988. Yeah. In line with this intuition, Falkenberg proposes to distinguish hard lies, overstatements, and soft lies, understatements. However, this taxonomy is misleading in 2 respects. First, not all overstatements and understatements are lies. If the CIC is a condition for lying, so the comparative, only statements displaying a certain level of discrepancy between B psi and B lambda can be lies. Second, it is not clear if an overstatement, hard lie, is necessarily more of a lie than an understatement, so a soft lie. Next section will show that the direction of misrepresentation is just one of the parameters of intensity that must be considered, another one being the discrepancy between B psi and B lambda. Frank says, I would say there's an implicit call to action that differs based on the 3 possible assertions, and the assertion that calls for a bigger change in action called is the more deceptive one. That's a good point, but I think the author is going to get there. They kind of are hinting at that here, that it's more complicated. So let's see where the author goes. They may be with you on this. Epistemic modality markers and degrees of commitment. There's a vast literature exploring the various ways in which an assertion can be mitigated, expressing a lower degree of belief as in 1G, or reinforcing, expressing a higher degree of belief as in 1H. And so all these people have said stuff. The most prominent linguistic devices used for these purposes, expressions like certainly, probably, perhaps, are called epistemic modals. This section will explain their pragmatic function and clarify why we generally assess understatements as more sincere or more honest than overstatements. Epistemic modals both indicate the speaker's confidence or lack of confidence in the truth of the proposition expressed, and qualify their commitment to the truth and the proposition expressed in their utterance. In other words, they act on two components of the assertion, altering both one, the psychological state expressed by the speaker, the degree of belief, and their degree of commitment to the truth of the proposition, the illocutionary strength. These two functions are distinct in nature but are entangled. If a speaker S mitigates or reinforces the degree of belief conveyed by their assertion, then S automatically mitigates or reinforces the illocutionary force of their assertion, that is, the degree of their commitment to the truth of the proposition. For instance, if you state to be instead of plainly stating to, you both mitigate the degree of belief expressed. To be expresses uncertainty in to, and the degree of your commitment to the truth of the asserted proposition. You are committed to the truth of to a much lower degree than to be. So yeah, so these are the statements. 2. Plato will quit smoking tomorrow. And to be, perhaps Plato will quit smoking tomorrow. So you can see how the perhaps modifies the first statement. The role that the epistemic modals play in reinforcing, weakening the illocutionary force of assertions explains why understatements are perceived as more honest than overstatements. Ceteris paribus, given the same degree of insincerity, like in the 1G through 1H, ceteris paribus, a reinforced assertion has a stronger illocutionary force than a mitigated assertion, so that the speaker has a stronger commitment to its truth. And if the commitment to sincerity is stronger in reinforced statements, then violating that commitment is more serious in that statement than in mitigated ones. Okay, I mean, this is just saying this is how it is. I don't know if this is the case. They're just saying it makes more of a difference when you're being overconfident. Yeah. Variations in illocutionary force induced by epistemic modals can also affect whether the speaker is asserting the proposition or not, and hence whether they are lying, because lying requires asserting. This is because epistemic modals can downgrade the degree of illocutionary force of a declarative sense to such an extent that it no longer counts as an assertion. We missed a no right here, but rather as a supposition or hypothesis. For instance, to be is a supposition rather than an assertion. Its insincere utterance does not amount to lying, while insincerely uttering its unmitigated version to does. Carson shares this intuition. There are weaker and stronger ways of warranting the truth of a statement. To count as a lie, a statement must be warranted to a certain minimum degree. This is even more evident in other speech acts. For instance, in Matteo, if Matteo utters 3b instead of 3, it is clear that he has not promised that he will buy you an elephant. He is merely suggesting it, while he would be promising it if he uttered 3. It seems that an insincere utterance of the first amounts to lying, while this is not true for the second. Tomorrow I will buy you an elephant, and 3b, perhaps tomorrow I will buy you an elephant. Yeah. So that makes it not even an assertion anymore. Not like not saying probably tomorrow I will buy you an elephant, but perhaps just means it is in the realm of possibility, which it is. I mean, if there are elephants for sale, I guess. Okay, to sum up, this section considered how to account for assertions of type 2 expressing graded beliefs, the B lambda graded lies, and 3 complex cases where both B lambda and B psi were graded. Both cases could have been dealt simply by appealing to condition CIC, but such an explanation would not have been able to account for differences determined by the direction of misrepresentation, overstatements versus understatements. And I want to be fair, I think I'm on Frank's side on this. I think Frank is right. It really depends on what you're doing. Now, the author's right here too. Like, yes, there are differences, but like I think it's more context dependent. So I'm mostly on Frank's side on this one. It really depends on where your commitments are lying. So yeah. This difficulty dissipates once it is understood that epistemic modals influence not only whether the sincerity condition is satisfied by altering the degree of belief expressed, but also whether the assertion condition is satisfied by altering the speaker's degree of commitment. This clarifies why Falkenberg's characterization of overstatements and understatements as hard and soft lies is misleading. First, assertions that represent the speaker as less certain than he is, understatements, can be hard lies if they achieve a sufficient degree of illocutionary force and insincerity. Second, not all understatements and overstatement are lies because they both may fail to achieve the sincerity and or assertion condition for lying. Yeah, so this is complicated. I'm mostly with the author here. I don't think they did the best job. I think Frank is actually right. This is whatever the bigger change is really matters. There's still a matter of degree going on here that is unexplained. Yeah. Okay. Lies that attack certainty. So far, this chapter has focused... Yeah, so wait. This is probably getting towards the end. I think it's only... Yeah, this is the last 2 pages. So this is basically the conclusion. Okay, Parsi. Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense, like a consequentialist component. Yeah. Frank says they sound more correct than Falkenberg, whoever he is. Yeah, I think this author is on the way to like getting it, like, you know, I think they're mostly right here. Yeah. This is a lot about intent. Well, that's a lot of what lying is. Why it's about misleading people, really. And like, how do you cash that out? So, I mean, misleading is something that you have to do intentionally. If you are, you know, misleading people, but like you didn't mean to do it, no one accuses you of lying. You could say, look, I was duped just like you were. I didn't know. Like, I was fooled. Like, I thought I was giving you the truth. And that's not counted as a lie. That's counted as... Well, what does that count as? Well, you're not lying, at least. Okay. Lies that attack certainty. So far, this chapter is focused on speaker certainty. This last section will consider hearer certainty and how lies can affect the hearer's degree of belief in the asserted proposition. The primary goal of lying is generally to attack a hearer's beliefs or his grounds for believing, typically to make the hearer believe that the asserted proposition is true, that is, to deceive him. Traditionally, this intention to deceive was believed to be a necessary condition for lying, but recently, on the grounds of several convincing arguments, most authors believe that this intention is merely frequently associated with lying. Chocolate says recklessness or negligence, perhaps. Yeah, that's right. Because, like, you might have been misled, and then, like, you propagating that misleading thing would be negligent because you didn't check. But, like, yeah, no one accuse you of lying if you didn't know. Well, like, you thought you were telling everyone good information. Okay, one prominent, but we shall see unsuccessful argument against the idea that lying requires intending to deceive is the argument from knowledge lies, or lies that only attack certainty. Knowledge lies aim to prevent the hearer from being certain of the truth of not P without intending him to believe P. Consider an example. Pietro has won a lottery and is ready to send his ticket to the address A1 to claim the prize. Luca wants to steal Pietro's ticket, so he tells him that he believes the correct address is A2 instead. He knows that this way Pietro will have to go to an internet cafe to be sure that the address indeed is A1 and plans to steal the ticket in the meanwhile. This is a knowledge lie because Luca has no intention to make Pietro believe, they fucked this up, that the address is A2, otherwise Pietro would send it to A2 and the plan would fail. He merely aims to undermine Pietro's certainty and knowledge that the correct address is A1. Yeah, so you're just fucking with somebody, and that could be counted as a lie too. According to the knowledge argument from knowledge lies against the intention to deceive, 1. Knowledge lies are not intended to deceive, but since knowledge lies are clearly lies. 3. Intending to deceive is not a necessary condition for lying. The problem with this argument is in premise 1, which holds only if one endorses a very narrow count of intended deception. One that includes attempts to make someone believe P and excludes attempts to modify his degree of belief in P. However, it seems that intending to alter someone's degree of belief may count as intending to deceive him, and consequently, that one is false. In fact, there is an obvious sense in which knowledge lies are intended to deceive. Even if Luca does not intend to make Pietro believe that the address is A2, it aims to undermine Pietro's conviction that the address is not A2, thereby deceiving him. Yeah, and this is you are always trying to do two things at once. It's not just that you are getting someone to believe one thing, you're also trying to get them to deny the opposite. And so this is part of it. And this is why this was a clever strategy of the author to say, like, it's always a comparative thing. You always have to do these two things at once. Okay. The argument from knowledge lies hence fails to prove that lying does not require intending to deceive, but it should not be concluded that intending to deceive is a necessary condition for lying. Other compelling counterexamples still hold, nor that knowledge lies are of no interest for theorizing about lying. On the contrary, knowledge lies are remarkable in several respects. They effectively illustrate that manipulating the hearer can be more important than convincing him of the truth of the utterance, and that altering his degree of belief can be a powerful way to manipulate his behavior. The lower somebody's confidence in a belief, the lower their disposition to act on its basis. Knowledge lies help us understand the essence of calumny, a common kind of political knowledge lie. Calumnies are lies that aim to undermine someone's reputation. Often calumnies work like knowledge lies. This happens when they merely aim to put into question someone's reputation without aiming to convince anyone that the propositional content of the calumny is true. Here's an example from Italian politics. During the 2011 Milan mayoral election, Letizia Moratti claimed that her opponent Giuliano Pisapia, and I apologize for how I say the Italian names, I'm dumb American, had been condemned for stealing a van used to kidnap and beat a young man. Lumpy says, "Hey, Lumpy, what's up? I'm a hide here. My RL responsibility won't find me here." Hey, philosophy is a safe space for like hiding from life. Many people use it for that. I'm glad to see you, Lumpy. Pisapia had indeed been accused of the crime in 1985, but he was also acquitted of all charges. This calumny can be read as a knowledge lie because it arguably did not aim to convince the electorate that Pisapia had committed the crime, a very difficult aim to achieve, given that all media quickly rectified Moratti's statement, but rather to publicly put into question Pisapia's criminal record and thus undermine the electoral certainty that Pisapia had never committed a crime. Finally, lies that alter hearer certainty are interesting as they represent a further parameter that influences the intensity of lies that adds to the ones considered in the previous section. The higher the expected epistemic damage, the more reprehensible the lie. And this is finally where we're getting down to it. This is a lot of, you see this term a lot in lying literature. How much are you fucking with the knowledge? That's really what it is. And so when you're doing something to deceive someone, you're fucking with their knowledge. And this is epistemic damage. Lumpy says, spent the day in the lab and the night in coordinating condo stuff. At least I managed to involve my fellow co-owners and they're doing more work. That's good. Good. So productive day. I mean, you know, shit got to get done. I had a good day too. I got what looks like at the step right before getting a paper accepted. So it's more likely than not that I'm going to have a paper accepted. So I mean, I've had I did a little bit of work at work today and then I got a good email. So that's how my day's been. Happy to hear it, Lumpy. Yeah. So, okay. This concludes the analysis of the concept of lying with respect to degrees of uncertainty that has identified three dimensions of certainty that are relevant to lying. The speaker's degree of certainty, the degree of certainty expressed by the assertion, and the degree to which the speaker aims to modify the hearer's certainty. And again, this is the epistemic damage. How bad are you fucking with somebody? Only the last two are relevant to define lying, but all affect the relevant strength of the lie. Lying can thus be considered a scalar phenomenon, a phenomenon that comes in degrees with three dimensions of great ability that are relevant to its evaluation from a linguistic, epistemic, and ethical point of view. How many have I published so far? This will be my fifth peer-reviewed paper. Yeah, fifth peer-reviewed paper. If it comes out. It'll also be one of the longer ones, and it's in a very good journal. So it'll be one of when people ask me where I've published, this will be one of the first ones I mention. So it'll be good. But anyway, that's the end of this paper. So let's review it. So for anyone here, amazing, doubly sincere, I'm independent. Yeah, I spend way too much time on philosophy. But anyway, what we're here is we are acting as the reviewers. We are grading the paper now. We're the reviewers. We're the captain. So if you, so Pisapia did it? Yes, exactly, Lumpy. If you thought this paper was fun and made your brain dance, give it a brain dance. Yes, spelling and capitalization matter. Anyone, of course, is free to use them. These are better TTV emotes. You can install the extension like 7 Frankerface or whatever. Also work, I think. Nog Stream for existential artistic drama. Nog Aura for aura about deep or ancient ideas. Nog Knife, slicing and dicing arguments. I mean, this is analytic philosophy. Nog Navel, navel gazing only for academics. Nog Turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, or my vote meh. Anything in the green will make the score go up. I give it an overall score. Anything in the red will make it go down. And the vote meh actually makes everything go towards the middle. And you can use it. Boo, it sucked. Yes, you can also boo it, but that won't add anything in. Frank says they're always in between yay and meh. Not always. We've had some, like, it's rare where everyone just likes a paper, but it has happened. Frank gives it a yay and a meh. Thank you. K-Pars gives it a knife yay and double meh. Yeah, you know, like, this is not bad analytic philosophy. I think it's okay. It was okay, argued, but was kind of bored. Yeah. So this is, philosophers are amazing. We take the most interesting subjects and find ways to make them boring. This is what we do. Chocolate Mints is yay, dance, knife, and an Oreo. See, I think Chocolate liked it. But, like, this is up to you. Feel free to review. Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, you know, not the worst stuff in the world, but, like, again, it had, like, it's a analytic philosophy. It kind of did the one narrow thing. And hi, Vipers. How are you? I hope you're well. It did its one narrow thing, you know. It defined, like, its comparative insincerity condition, and then it just sort of, like, described what was going on and how to apply it. And, like, that was basically it. This is not, like, a complicated theory in some sense. It's like, okay, there's insincerity, there's like the absolute, then you grade it, and then you have this relative one, and then they say, okay, it's relative, and it's relative to what, how you act, what you believe, how much it affects, like, can it affect someone else, and how much does it fuck with them. So, like, yeah. Sockna says yay and a knife. Yeah, I'm feeling more like K-Pars. I think I'm in agreement with K-Pars. It's analytic. It gets you know, maybe 30% knife. Yeah. Well, it was analytic philosophy. I feel like it did argue in a technical way that made sense. And, you know, they did describe, like, this was sort of like this would work in Bayesian reasoning. What counts as, like, a lie under that sort of knowledge scheme? How bad would it fuck with your priors? That's what you're doing. You're telling someone the wrong priors. And, like, so I feel like that deserves a knife, that it would actually, you know, kind of do that well. So it's like, I think I'm in agreement with K-Pars. Like, it does some analytic stuff. Like, it gives you the formal tools that you can, like, apply in your wider theories if you want. But, like, a lot of it didn't go very far either. I was actually thinking that with the, like, presumably, possibly, likely stuff. Yeah. I think. I'm not entirely sure what that sentence meant. Thinking that with the like, presumably, possibly, likely stuff. Yeah, I'm not quite got it. But yeah, it didn't bite off more than it could chew. It just sort of, like, stuck to its guns. But I think it did a good job at that stuff, in what it was doing. So, yeah. Okay. But yeah, that'll be it for now. I have to, like, calm myself down. There was that one part where they added the percentages of belief. Yeah, like 65, 75. Yeah. Like, they discussed that. And it's like, yeah, I think Frank had the best comment there. It's like, it's relative to what you, like, it doesn't matter where you draw the line. It's going to be a relative to what, like, how far off what you think is going on. And then how much does it fuck with the other person's basis for knowledge? Are you trying to mess up someone's prior understanding of the world that is, like, accurate? That is really what's kind of critical. So it's like this relative measure of stuff.